Hi, everyone who's joining. Please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. Tell us what city you're coming from, because I always love seeing like all of the global friends we have. So introduce yourselves, what city you're coming from. Also, if you want to kind of expand your community and your network, put in your LinkedIn if you want others to kind of connect with you online as well. Hi, Anne from Atlanta. It's sunny 70. Wait, Sally, are you in New York?
I am in Manhattan and it is
So
not 70 degrees here right now.
for everyone who's on the phone, it's snowing right now. Like literally, it is almost March and it is snowing.
Oh
And
my
it's
God.
basically the first snow of the season, which is, pretty late.
Right? It's so funny. So hello, everyone who's joining us. So introduce yourselves in the chat. I love seeing friends. We got Minneapolis, Lynn from New York City. Hi, everyone. Yes, tell us. Snow is fairly normal in New York in March, all through April. Oh, I know, unfortunately. Oh, it's snowing in Boston as well. Hi, Shiny. Allison Ardette from California, Atlanta. We have Barb from Omaha, Nebraska. Hello. Hi, everyone. We'll be starting soon. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining for our microlearning today on post-traumatic growth. Before we start, in the chat, please enter your name, company, if you'd like, what city you're coming from. If you want to connect with other folks in the community on LinkedIn, add your LinkedIn profile so you can kind of grow your network. And if you can, for the folks who are watching in the live Zoom audience, turn on your videos if you can, if you feel comfortable, because we love seeing your beautiful faces. And I know for the speakers, it's just helpful when we see your expressions. For those who are watching this on live stream on LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook, we want you interacting as well. We don't want this to be passive for you. So in the comments on whatever platform you're on, please comment, ask questions. I'll be moderating those pages if you have questions or whatnot. We want you in the conversation. So please add to the comments. And I'll be checking those as well. For those who are watching live stream, introduce yourselves as well. What city you're coming from. If you want to expand your LinkedIn, put your LinkedIn in the comments as well. We really want you engaged. And also, if you're watching this as well online, we want to help more people. So if you're watching this right now, please like, comment, and share so that we can help more people with this free training. Our community of 7 microlearning helps our listener elevate their mindset and skill set by bringing in leading authors, coaches, executives, founders, and subject matter experts. Our goal is to train over 1 million people. Our microlearnings are trained on training and development, focuses on offering bite-sized, small learning units with just the right amount of information to help learners achieve a goal. This is not a webinar where you passively listen to a talking head like me. We want you to immediately take action. We want you to learn. We want you to grow. Our goal of Community 7 is to democratize leadership development for everyone. That's why we make these microlearnings open and free to the public. I want to thank Community of 7 core members and supporter members for supporting these talks with your membership dues so that we can help even more people. If you're interested in becoming a supporter member, go to communityof7.com and it's only $99 a year. For those in the live Zoom audience, if you can, once again, turn on your video. Today's topic is on post-traumatic growth with Sally Wolf. We all have heard about post-traumatic disorder and post-traumatic stress. But the first time I heard the term post-traumatic growth was when I talked to Sally. What's so beautiful about this idea is that we can turn trauma, our pain, our hurt, some of our darkest moments can actually lead to beauty, growth, finding meaning in our lives. I immediately thought of my favorite Rumi quote when Sally brought up this idea of talking about post-traumatic growth. And I thought of Rumi's quote, and it's this: "The wound is a place where the light enters you. The wound is a place where the light enters you." It's a reminder that our hurt and pains are prerequisites, not deterrents from our happiness and our joy. So last week I posted about how when I read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning and how it changed my life. For those who are unfamiliar with Frankl, he survived unspeakable torture and pain during the Holocaust and founded logotherapy, a school of psychology that focuses on finding one's meaning in life as a means to thrive, and in extreme cases like Frankl, to just survive. When I first read Frankl, I was in my 20s. I was upset. I felt broken. I felt like I had to fight for everything I had in my life. My parents had escaped war-torn Vietnam 2 decades earlier. I grew up not having much. I had a lot of friends die due to gang violence growing up in Inglewood, California. I often asked why things were happening to me, why I had to struggle so much. After reading Frankl, it made me realize that I was not a victim of my circumstances, but I was the arbiter. It was the space between the trauma in my life and my response where my power lay. It was a choice that I owned and controlled. Things weren't happening to me, they were happening for me. My post-traumatic growth with Sally Wolf. We all have heard about post-traumatic disorder and post-traumatic stress. But the first time I heard the term post-traumatic growth was when I talked to Sally. What's so beautiful about this idea is that we can turn trauma, our pain, our hurt, some of our darkest moments can actually lead to beauty, growth, finding meaning in our lives. I immediately thought of my favorite Rumi quote when Sally brought up this idea of talking about post-traumatic growth. And I thought of Rumi's quote, and it's this: "The wound is a place where the light enters you. The wound is a place where the light enters you." It's a reminder that our hurt and pains are prerequisites, not deterrents from our happiness and our joy. So last week I posted about how when I read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning and how it changed my life. For those who are unfamiliar with Frankl, he survived unspeakable torture and pain during the Holocaust and founded logotherapy, a school of psychology that focuses on finding one's meaning in life as a means to thrive, and in extreme cases like Frankl, to just survive. When I first read Frankl, I was in my 20s. I was upset. I felt broken. I felt like I had to fight for everything I had in my life. My parents had escaped war-torn Vietnam 2 decades earlier. I grew up not having much. I had a lot of friends die due to gang violence growing up in Inglewood, California. I often asked why things were happening to me, why I had to struggle so much. After reading Frankl, it made me realize that I was not a victim of my circumstances, but I was the arbiter. It was the space between the trauma in my life and my response where my power lay. It was a choice that I owned and controlled. Things weren't happening to me, they were happening for me. My response to what life held in store for me was the key to my growth. How I responded was the key to my happiness. Before I introduce Sally, I'm going to leave you with this quote from Frankl that can change your life if you're able to really internalize its meaning. Between the stimulus and the response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In that space is the power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. In the chat or comments section below, I want you to answer the following, but don't press send till I tell you. What has your trauma or pain in your life taught you? So whether you're watching this on live stream or in the live Zoom audience, answer this. Don't press send till I tell you. What has your trauma or pain taught you in your life? I'm going to count down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm stronger than I realized. Empathy. To be strong and to get up again. Trauma has taught me resilience. That I'm stronger than I have ever known. To keep going, who I am. I love that. Let's just pause and just take a lot of that goodness to persist, to understand other people's pain. Such powerful, powerful stories that we can kind of start telling ourselves. So I'm going to introduce our guest. Sally Wolf inspires others to flourish and live their best lives. It's funny because I think we were emailing back and forth prior to this event, and we live really parallel lives. I'm a former Stanford, Harvard grad. She's the same, but I think reversed. She thinks she did undergrad at Harvard, right? And then grad at Stanford. And we are in this path of trying to heal and also help others. So as a creator of Lightwork, Sally has combined over 20 years of corporate experience working for big brands like NBC and Time Warner, with her love of mentoring and nurturing to create innovative professional development programs designed to enable people to find both meaning in their jobs and their lives. In addition to leading these customized workshops, she coaches one-on-one, both with companies and in her private practice, helping clients envision and build their best lives. She also provides inspirational keynotes and also helps lead panels. So excited to have you. Round of applause for Sally. Hey, Sally.
Hi.
So excited to have you here today. So first question I have for you. So tell us, before we get into the more serious questions, tell us about your story about walking up to 50 Cent, the rapper, and asking him to sing to you. And what does that teach us about the power of asking and how you use this creative chutzpah, not only to ask 50 Cents to rap for you, but how it got you pole dancing into a Netflix documentary.
Two separate asks, but I am happy to connect them because I have pole danced to 50 Cent, but not in that moment. So years ago, there was a benefit that I was attending. I helped to co-found the Junior Board of New York Restoration Project, which is an amazing nonprofit in New York that helps clean and green underserved spaces. And there was a spring picnic. It was a benefit. It was a gala type thing. And 50 Cent was one of the co-chairs. I was one of the junior co-chairs. And it happened to fall on my birthday, which is May 19th. And I've always loved my birthday. And he is very famous for that song it's called Into Club, but it's about, hey, shorty, it's your birthday. So what you cannot tell, I love how Zoom is a height equalizer, but if we were in person, I would probably be looking up to all of you because I'm 5'1". And so by almost every measure, I am short or shorty. So I walked up to him and I figured you got to be creative, right? Because everyone might ask for something like a song or a picture. But I said, hey, it's actually my birthday and I'm short. I'm 5'1". So would you sing to me? And here's the best part. I don't know if it was a manager, agent, handler, someone was beside him in that moment and started to tell me no. But he ate it up and smiled and laughed and said, of course. So, you have to ask for things that you desire in life. And I do believe that when you put your personal authentic touch on it, and it's actually tied to what we're going to talk about today, because there's so much about meaning and growth that is tied to authenticity and subjectivity, right? You do it your way. So that was the 50 Cent story. And we have it on video, but this was about, I don't know, 12 years ago. So, before it was like iPhone video. So it's probably on some tape somewhere that I am not exactly sure where, but I do have that in my archives. And pole dancing is something that I discovered, gosh, about 17 years ago. And it really changed my life. For the record, I was not a dancer growing up. I went to probably about 80 bat mitzvahs in 7th grade. I grew up in a pretty Jewish town, and I kid that was like my most happening social year ever. And I danced like this, like very self-consciously. That quote about dance like nobody's watching, that was not me. But I discovered pole dancing. And as someone, you mentioned our schools, anyone who goes to Harvard, Stanford, or Stanford, Harvard, tend to be pretty cerebral and think a lot. And pole dancing happened to be, I on a whim tried a class, happened to be the first time in my life I was taught to really feel into things with my body first, right? How does it feel? And there's this quote that I've heard referenced a lot in my dance circles about the body doesn't lie. So for all the overthinking we do, there's something intuitive in our hearts, in our guts, in the way that we move that really can be a powerful guide to our lives when we listen to it. And so that was my intro to pole dancing. Did it for about 10 years before the first of, and we'll talk about this today, 3 cancer diagnoses. So the Netflix documentary that I submitted my name for, when I was when my hair was going to grow back after chemo, I realized I wanted to remember that I had danced my way through cancer. I wanted footage of myself dancing bald for me. I had no idea there was a Netflix documentary being made, right? But I wanted to remember my strength in that moment. And lo and behold, a couple of years later, Netflix, there was a director making a documentary on pole dancing. And I submitted an application and said, look, I danced my way through cancer. And so that is how I am, not quite naked, but not wearing a lot of clothing on Netflix for a little story arc about dancing through cancer.
I love that. It reminds me of one of my favorite quotes, which is, if you don't ask, the answer is no, right? And so, kind of going past that fear and just going up to 50 Cent and asking, hey, will you sing a song for me? It takes a lot of chutzpah. um,
I've worked on chutzpah my whole life, right? So, like I said, I went to 80 bat mitzvahs in 7th grade, so I've had some practice.
you got a lot of training. So explain to us what post-traumatic growth means to you. I mean, the first time I ever heard that terminology was from you. Um, and how did, you mentioned your cancer diagnosis over a decade ago. How did your trauma inform you in this kind of process and how you teach others?
Sure. And I have to say, I just want to start with one thing, because if anyone's on this screen, sometimes people will say to me, I didn't go through what you've gone through. And I think the word trauma gets a lot of attention and use, and sometimes even overuse nowadays. And any pain, anything that you have gone through that has been a challenge or hard, right? That's real. And anything that we're going to talk about today, so what's called clinically post-traumatic growth, I want you to think about it more broadly, like whether or not you would have described something as a trauma, because it's all of this is relevant. And I actually rarely personally use the word trauma for my own experience. But I would say that, of course, cancer has been hard and it's been an obstacle. And for me, I think a lot about not just going through something, but growing through it and ultimately glowing on the other side of it. And I like that because it's really easy to remember: go, grow, glow. And also because it really does describe, for me, very authentically, how I view this cancer journey. And what I would say about that is it's not an either or. It doesn't mean that I would have chosen it. It doesn't mean that it's not hard. It doesn't mean that I don't have fear in a lot of moments. But alongside that, I found the tools and made choices to say, okay, it's been dark, and also it's brought me a lot of light. It's been an obstacle and it remains one, and also so many opportunities, right? I would not be on Netflix right now if it weren't for cancer. And so kind of making the conscious choice to say, how do I choose meaning in this? How do I find it when I look at the journey, and how do I make it for myself? And that's a really subjective thing, meaning the meaning that I would take from my cancer journey maybe and likely is entirely different from that someone else may take from the same journey. Or we all just lived through a pandemic, or maybe are still living through it in some of our cases. And the meaning, if we choose to take meaning from it, the meaning each of us takes, right? Same pandemic, billions of different lives lived through it. The meaning may be different, but the people who are more likely to flourish on the other side, to look back at the pandemic and say, I really grew through that, are the people who are going to connect the dots, the sort of figurative dots of their pandemic journey to make it a meaningful one. Is that okay?
love that.
Sorry, I
No,
paused in case you had any questions, but I happy to keep going or happy to let you jump
no.
in.
I love that clarification too, in terms of trauma, that sometimes it can be kind of overly used, and one person's trauma um, is another person's typical day, right? And I never want to kind of discount people's experience, right, with
Right.
that.
I mean, right now we see, and you and I have largely reconnected through LinkedIn, right? And how many stories do we see or hear about layoffs right now? And you could have two people, same title, same backgrounds, both laid off. For one person, that is a gift because they have been hoping for that, because they want to move on to something else. For someone else, that could be a source of trauma or real hardship for whatever the different circumstances in each of their lives, or just their ability to lean into something unexpected and say, this is, this has happened, right? Because the what happened we can't control. It's actually, I put a stack of books by my side that I figured I might reference, and when you were talking, you said the what happened to you, right? And this is a book by Oprah last year, co-authored, and it's a what happened to you, but also how do you find a way to transition the what happened to you question into what happened for you? And it can still hurt, it can still sting, but there's something about the way that we are able, and this is a very human skill. This is something our brains are wired to do. We are wired to make meaning, to tell stories, right? Some of the only relics that remain from like, even like, think back to cave people, like there are these little pictures on walls that are stories. We are wired to tell stories, and when we choose to tell stories that serve us, that is a really powerful tool that we have. Because otherwise, and I've watched a lot of the previous conversations you've had in this community, and so I imagine someone has touched on this, but our brains are wired with a negativity bias, right? We are wired, we have, like, depending upon the source, 60,000, 70,000, 80,000 thoughts a day, most unconscious, but like 90% of them are negative. And that gets wired in. There's a saying in the positive psychology world, neurons that fire together wire together. What that means is that so many of these negative thoughts and reactions are innate after a while. So we have to consciously choose, just like I was talking about choosing meaning, choose the stories we tell ourselves, and sometimes override what's already there. But neuroplasticity, which is the real ability to do that and to rewire our brains, is real. And so that can exist for something simple, just like a negative thought you have about a small change you need to make it or seek to make in your life. But it can be huge too, about how you look back at some past experience and choose to figure out what meaning it has brought to your life and how you can use it to move forward. And like I was saying, to go and grow forward.
Yeah, I love that. I think that the difficulty that maybe some of the folks who are kind of watching right now might have is, and I know I had this trouble or difficulty, um, is that a lot of it was just hardwired into me. So I always joke around that, you know, I was literally born in my mom's womb worrying. Because if you think about it, I was in my mom's womb while we were escaping Vietnam, where we had to leave everything. And there was so much fear. And I'm just trying to, I picture what she was going through and what she was seeing and all that worry kind of like literally being fed to me, right? And I was a worrier most of my life because my mom was a worrier, like, because literally everything, her thought was your whole life can just change in one moment,
Yeah.
because for her it did, right? How do we, folks who are watching this, because it's easier said than done, right, to look at the positive side, how do you rewire your brain when you've spent your entire life, me in my womb, right, um, worrying, you know, owning that trauma as it's ours? How do we change that when it's so hardwired into us?
I think part of it is the belief that you can, right? So if we start with a growth mindset and the belief that, because I'm not going to negate, and look, I'm a warrior too. I'm like a uber type A warrior about big things, small things. So it's not that, a couple different things. So growth mindset, and I'm guessing most people in this community know what it is, but just that ability to believe that you can figure things out at the highest level that you haven't done before. By contrast, a fixed mindset is that if there's this fear, it's fear-based. It's this, if I haven't done it, I don't know how to do it. I can't figure it out because I don't know before. And a growth mindset is the opposite. It's more of a learner's mindset. I like to think of two visuals, and I don't have these slides up and ready, but like a tree for a growth mindset of the brain, like kind of a tree superimposed in the brain versus a lock for a fixed mindset. And the way that that works is, I'm a big believer, and this aligns so nicely with micro learnings, small steps, like a series of small steps, consistent steps. And that could be a step, a physical step out in the world, but also it can be a step of like, what are you telling yourself? Going back to that, like, what is the story we tell ourselves? A series of small, consistent steps can lead to big change. So I'm not going to sit here and say, whether it's me looking at cancer, whether it's you looking back at your experience, obviously there's been a lot of time that separated the childhood experience you're sharing. And for me, I've been on this cancer journey for over 7 years now. So I am not going to tell you in the moment something happens, everything feels okay. We are all human. We are men. I try not to use good and bad to describe emotions because none of them are really bad. We're meant to feel them all, but we're meant to feel the dark stuff. Part of the human experience is that spectrum. So whether it's fear or anxiety or anger or sadness or whatever, post-traumatic growth or growing on the other side of something doesn't mean that we don't feel all those things and may still feel them, right? You may look back at your childhood, and I'll let you speak for yourself in a second, and there's still moments you see as hard moments. I'm not going to sit here and say that I don't still have those with cancer, but I can genuinely look back and share so many moments of light that coexist and coexisted if I look for them in even the darkest days. And that's where I think we start to really be able to move the needle. And actually, I would love, can we play like a quick little
Totally.
2-minute game? All right, I'm just going to invite, and I know people are on all different platforms, but I can see several of you on Zoom, and thank you so much. I have it in gallery mode for having so many videos on. I look for the nodders and the smiles. It's really helpful. So I'm going to invite everyone in whatever space you are in to just look around the room and make a note, whether in your head or on a piece of paper, of everything you see that is red. Kind of like any shade of red, doesn't really matter. Take about 30 seconds. Could be something someone's wearing on the screen. It could be the eraser of a pencil. If you're outside, although I don't really think Michael's outside, although that looks very appealing. Could be a stop sign or a traffic light. And now I want you to look around and just make a note of anything you see that is any shade of blue. It's like Sesame Street on microlearning, but I promise there's a purpose to this. And now yellow. And I love this on Zoom because I see all the heads going like amazing. All right, we did a really quick version of this because we have so little time and there's so much we could do. But how many of you, this is always a vulnerable moment for me, but I'm pretty sure most of you will say yes, saw at least one thing that you maybe didn't notice before I primed you to see it? I'm seeing some nods, right? Okay, good. And I didn't give you very much time. How many of you saw maybe two things? See, okay, great. Anne, thank you. Your hand is like on my top row. So here's the thing, and that was really quick. And usually I would do that in a group for more time to really let people notice subtle little things. For example, if anyone didn't notice the red recording button on the Zoom or all the mute signs, right? There's all these subtle little things. But here's the thing. What we look for in life is what we see. The longer if I had given you more time to look for red and look for blue and look for yellow, I bet your lists would have been much longer. What we look for is what we see. You can take that exercise out into the world. Like if you go on the same walk every day, just say, today I'm going to look for red. Today I'm going to look for blue or green or whatever. And I promise you will notice new things. What we look for is what we see. That's true for red and blue and yellow and whatever your favorite color is. It's also true for light. It's true for gratitude. How many moments can we find to be grateful for in a day? Well, are we looking for them? And it's true for meaning. So when we look for meaning in difficult situations, and this sort of is part of my long answer to your question about childhood and looking back, when we look for meaning, I believe, and science shows we can find it. And it's a coexisting alongside the pain. It doesn't say the pain isn't real, but when we can find purpose within it, it adds something to it. And it's not just for us. It's then a source of connection, because someone wrote this in the chat earlier about what have you learned when you asked about what have you learned from your pain or trauma. There's a connection element. Because even though my source of pain and your source of pain and someone else's may be entirely different, we know what pain is. We know what it feels like to have fear, to see fear, as you were talking about. And there's a beautiful opportunity for connection too, which at the end of the day is one of the best sources of meaning and purpose in our lives as well. So many studies affirm that, and just connecting with one another here is such a beautiful opportunity.
I love that. One of the analogies I always use is intentionality and purpose is like an address. You know, if you look at a GPS, you need to know that address in order for the GPS to get you to where you want to go. If your intentionality, if your purpose, if you don't have, clear, this is where I want to head, it's hard for you to get there, right? It's just like if you don't have an address, that GPS is worthless because it's not going to get you where you want to go. And so intentionality and purpose is kind of the key, right?
Agreed. And I think it's important. So often meaning and purpose, those two words, we use them a lot together and even interchangeably. And meaning, by definition, meaning is really more a looking back. So what we're talking about here, and you mentioned PTSD and post-traumatic growth earlier. So if you make a bell curve, and I never know if Zoom flips me or not, but make us a bell curve. PTSD is on the side, right? That's like the struggling, the languishing, the real challenge of finding meaning in something. Post-traumatic growth is the other side of the resilience bell curve. The best way to get there is the ability to make meaning out of whatever the the trauma, the hardship, the situation. And that's where I've said a few times now, it's subjective. It just has to be authentic to you. There's no right or wrong way to make meaning out of whatever it is that is a hardship. But that's a beautiful thing, right? Because it lets us know that we have that strength within ourselves to lean into our own strengths, our own individual unique lights. So that it really is subjective. But the thing is, and this, I don't know what you have, I believe, a psych degree from Stanford, right?
Yeah.
I have a psych degree from Harvard. Like you said, we flipped schools. I have the psych degree from Harvard. I have 2 masters from Stanford. And it's unbelievable to me that when I think about the core curriculums that I had at all of those places, and then the deep dive into psychology at Harvard, not once was I required to take a class on getting to know myself, understanding all of this. And I had there was a huge core curriculum, right? And this, I fundamentally believe should be the core curriculum of life, because we are all going to have hardship. No one gets through life right? The more you open your heart, right? And this is the Rumi quote, which I love too, about the wound is where the light comes in. That is life. Unless even if we never leave our apartments or houses, like there's going to be a dark moment. But especially when we open ourselves up to the world, we open ourselves up to disappointment. The longer we live, we open ourselves up, right? All sorts of things happen. That is universal. But how we choose to lean into them and know our strengths well enough to know, if I lean into this in this way, I am more likely to get through it. And so there's sort of 2 versions of meaning in post-traumatic growth. There's like the smaller micro version that I would talk about, which is in the specific day, right? In a day, how do you get through that day? How do you just know what to lean into for yourself? And actually, can I share a picture? Because I want to tell a quick story. Do I have?
Yeah, you're able to.
Amazing. I'm going to share a picture. It's me and my nephew. I would love for folks in the chat to just let me know kind of what you see, what you feel like this moment is sharing with you, what feelings you think, what that day was. And I'll just leave it up for a second. I'll try to open the chat at the same time. Okay. Joy, lots of joy. I love that. Joy is actually my middle name. So I love that. Learning and partnership, work, experimentation, connection, trust. All those things are true. Great. Let me tell you about that moment. That moment was about 7:00 at night. I was at my nephew. So he's the little guy who made me an auntie. I'm not a mom, but I am an auntie to 3. Auntie is, if we connect on LinkedIn, you'll see it's one of the main titles on my LinkedIn. And it's my favorite title. So he was about 4 at the time. And that day I was at his apartment. We were blowing up balloons. Someone wrote about partnership. And one of the first words I taught Ryan when he was about 2 was collaboration. So we collaborated on crafting. We collaborated on blowing up balloons. We're big on balloons. You can see I have the Banksy print over there with the balloon. What a magical moment. He had 2 little sisters who were on the couch nearby. My whole family was there. All the things you wrote in the chat are true. It was fun. It was joyful. There was wonder and curiosity. What you didn't see in that picture is that a few hours earlier, I got the news that I thought would kick me in the gut, that would crumble me for good. Because I effectively had just received the 3rd cancer diagnosis that I've had. And that day was when my oncologist said it had metastasized, it was incurable, it was stage 4. So that same day that ended with tons of balloons being blown up, that had happened. And I had been walking across 23rd Street and I was sobbing because that obviously was not news that I was hoping to hear. And it was not news that my oncologist expected to give me. I had been told my cancer had been cured. We just had a local recurrence, but no one expected this. But it happened. And yet when I look back at that day, I remember that, okay, yes, I was sobbing on 23rd Street, but I had just left my dance studio. So I sort of had a lot of endorphins going and I had that good feeling that comes from dance. I was with a friend when I got that call. So I was sobbing, but I also had a hand on my shoulder to remind me that I was not alone. My nephew and my sister were just down the block coincidentally. So I managed to get a little hug from that same guy. He had no idea what was going on. And that's sort of the beauty of children sometimes, is they keep us present. I then had coffee with that friend, got impromptu pizza and quality time with another close friend, right? New York City pizza is the best. And then I went to my sister's, where my parents and brother and sister and brother-in-law and the 3 kids were. I was never alone. I was surrounded by love. And I look back on that picture that I just shared, on that moment, on that day, that I thought would be, if that day happened, despite everyone telling me how positive I was with cancer, how inspiring, all of that, when it was behind me, that was the day I thought, okay, game over. Like, that's not when I'm going to be able to move forward. But I look back on that day and that picture I just showed you, and I almost only see the light, all the good that coexisted. And I think it's a decision that we make, because that day is not a day I would wish on anyone. But how many lucky breaks did I have in that day, from friends, from family, right? You go down the list. And so that is, I think, what we get to do in the face of a difficult moment. Some days it's going to be 99% dark. I'm not going to minimize that dark, like, right? Some days are really hard. But when we can choose just a little light, and so that's like a micro moment, right? That is looking back on one day, which we can all do, right? We all have had a day that delivered something we wouldn't have chosen. And I would invite you to figure out, is there one thing I could find in that day? Just like one text from a friend, one call, one thing that made me smile or laugh that I put on to binge on Netflix because I was looking to escape, and I just was able to find a little light. And then the light is right, the light starts to enter. And we can do it in a bigger way with, and like for me, as I look back on a cancer journey, and to move the needle. And I think that that's where the real power lies. But we build that muscle through choices in any given day, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. Thank you so much for sharing with vulnerability. I mean, I think it's so powerful. Um, one of the things I've been, taking classes on is this art form of kintsugi. I don't know if you've heard. It's a Japanese art form where you repair broken pottery with gold. So the whole notion of it is, usually when things are broken, we discard it, we throw it away. And this Japanese art form that's been around for centuries basically repairs it with gold. And what's so powerful about it is that it's made even more beautiful, and it's made even more stronger
Yep.
than before it was broken. And I think that is a metaphor for life too. We're not broken, right? And these cracks and crevices that we thought were, you know, things to be shamed of are really what's made us stronger in the end. Um, and It's such a beautiful art form, but it's also this, it's really made me kind of like an introspect and look at my life, all those things that I was ashamed of when I was younger. Um, you know, Getting laid off, having a difficult time growing up, or things that kind of eventually made me stronger as a person today, right? Um, so before we're going to be opening it to questions soon. So if you're on the live stream, ask it in the comment section, or if you're in the Zoom audience, let me know. You can raise your hand with the emoji or in the comments. Question for you before we open it up. Post-traumatic growth in some ways talks about finding our power, the beauty within difficult situations. how important is community in post-traumatic growth? I talk, community has always been something that is so important to me. There's a reason why I call this community of seven. You posted a while back about telling your boss, Lisa, when you were at Time Warner, that transparency is important to you, important in for you being able to flourish. Can you expound on that, the importance of community, and dig a little bit deeper into that one time period?
Sure. And I don't know if it was my Wi-Fi or yours, but I lost you for a second. But was the word transparency was part of what you said about transparency? Okay.
Yes. Yes, transparency.
Sure. And for reference, I think you're referring to the post. So my boss, I told her, I didn't wait until I knew I had cancer to tell her I had cancer. I didn't even tell her when, like, right when I was waiting for the biopsy, all of that. I told her the day that the mammogram sonogram was suspicious, and I knew I wasn't going to be showing up for work 100%. And I thought that it was my responsibility to share that with her just so she knew, because we had a lot going on. And it also was a gift to myself because she knew what was going on. And I think that that's what transparency gifts us when we find the courage to share, is that ability to feel support, that ability to not feel alone, which can be, I mean, you can be surrounded. I live in Manhattan, right? There's a million people walking by at any given moment. And yet a lot of people in New York feel alone. There's like almost that paradox of numbers because you're so aware of how many other people are around. And I think that for me, cancer has really driven home. And you just talked about kintsugi, which I love that concept as well. And I love that you're creating art with it. I've referenced it in at least one talk I've given because it's so true. I went through life striving for perfection, right? Harvard, Stanford, Time Warner, NBC, all these brands. And when you strive for perfection, first of all, nothing's ever really perfect, but we think in our heads, right? So I was like always very put together, blown out hair, all the stuff, right? And cancer, there's nothing about cancer that's perfect. I mean, like you can have a great cancer story, relatively speaking, but like arguably no one wants cancer. And yet it was the moment in my life where I couldn't be independent, or I didn't choose to be independent in the way that like, I've got this, right? And so from the outset, my family, like doctors would say, they had to bring in more chairs for consults. Everyone was there. It was a whole divide and conquer. And so I always say that it was my body, but my family's cancer. So that's one unit of community, which is family for me. For some others, that might be like chosen family with friends. My friends showed up in amazing ways. I let them in a deep, I've always been surrounded by the gift of incredible friendship, but the way in which people showed up, because I let them, right? Flying into New York for a day just to hang out on my couch, like when I had surgical drains hanging from my body, we have to choose to let people in those moments. And that's the transparency in that post about Lisa. And more generally, that I believe cancer has taught me. That's been one of the, when I look back and I talk about the growth from cancer, that is a very real lesson that I feel grateful to have learned. Because when we are not perfect, when we let people see those cracks and how we filled them with our own subjective gold, that is a source of connection. And that strengthens any community that we are a part of.
So true. I just want to read some comments up here. Jess Morris in our Zoom audience has a really great comment. It's difficult to go from a survival mindset to a thriving or growth mindset, especially when there aren't many examples in your own community. That's why talks like these are so important. Thank you. Totally hear you, Jess. Culturally, I grew up in a Vietnamese American one where we didn't really talk about emotions, where getting psychological help or therapy is rarely talked about. And so having these conversations are so important. I think vulnerability is kind of the key in all of us healing. And that's why I really believe in community. Um, Anne says, your strength and positivity, Sally, is truly inspiring. Um, if there's anyone that has comments, if you want to unmute yourself, please let me know in the chat. And Pantelis, when you share, you give your whole community a chance to grow post-trauma. I love that. Does anyone have a question that you might want a question? Oh, Anne, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
We can hear
Perfect.
you.
Great. So, you know, getting to the other side is, a lot more difficult for some people than others. And when you spoke about the pandemic, it reminded me of several friends of mine who they still aren't there. They're still not able to kind of see the other end of it. And it was strictly pandemic speaking. Not that any of them had a horrible, bout with COVID or anything like that, but just that a lot of them, for the first time in their lives, sought therapy. A lot of them, have become extreme germaphobes and just always worried about getting sick in any way, shape, or form now, and they never were like that before. So I guess maybe if you have any insight for people who are kind of in that space right now, we're hoping that they get there. But I've seen the damage that it's done to some of my friends, and it's horrible to me. And I'm a very positive person. I try to help them in any way I can, but they're just not there yet, and I don't know how to guide them.
Yeah, that's a great question. I saw that you Harvard, Stanford, Time Warner, NBC, all these brands. And when you strive for perfection, first of all, nothing's ever really perfect, but we think in our heads, right? So I was like always very put together, blown out hair, all the stuff, right? And cancer, there's nothing about cancer that's perfect. I mean, like you can have a great cancer story, relatively speaking, but like arguably no one wants cancer. And yet it was the moment in my life where I couldn't be independent, or I didn't choose to be independent in the way that like I've got this, right? And so from the outset, my family, like doctors would say, they had to bring in more chairs for consults. Everyone was there. It was a whole divide and conquer. And so I always say that it was my body, but my family's cancer. So that's one unit of community, which is family for me. For some others, that might be like chosen family with friends. My friends showed up in amazing ways. I let them in a deep, I've always been surrounded by the gift of incredible friendship, but the way in which people showed up, because I let them, right? Flying into New York for a day just to hang out on my couch, like when I had surgical drains hanging from my body, we have to choose to let people in those moments. And that's the transparency in that post about Lisa. And more generally, that I believe cancer has taught me. That's been one of when I look back and I talk about the growth from cancer, that is a very real lesson that I feel grateful to have learned. Because when we are not perfect, when we let people see those cracks and how we filled them with our own subjective gold, that is a source of connection. And that strengthens any community that we are a part of.
So true. I just want to read some comments up here. Jess Morris in our Zoom audience has a really great comment. It's difficult to go from a survival mindset to a thriving or growth mindset, especially when there aren't many examples in your own community. That's why talks like these are so important. Thank you. Totally hear you, Jess. Culturally, I grew up in a Vietnamese American one where we didn't really talk about emotions, where getting psychological help or therapy is.
But DM'd it to me a bit ago, so I was gonna try to tackle it anyway. I'm glad you asked it for all. I think that's a really fair question. And I actually personally can just say I share a lot of that, like the sort of re-entry from COVID as someone who's immunocompromised has been an ongoing dance. And so I get that and I empathize. So I don't know if there's a quick self-assessment that I love. I do with a lot of clients and I highly recommend, called the VIA Character Strengths. And the reason I love it so much, and I can put the URL in the chat, is we all have, there are 24 universal human strengths. We all have all 24. But the ordering for each of us is unique and different. And like, actually, if you did the math and did 24 factorial, it's far more than the number of people on the planet. So it really is your superpower when you think about knowing and owning your strengths. And when you lean into them, there's a lot of science that shows, and these strengths, for people who don't know, are things like gratitude, kindness, bravery, perseverance, prudence, honesty, forgiveness. There are 24. And the beauty of them is when we actually know ours, there's a lot of science that shows that whole, play to your strengths is a saying most of us have heard, but it's actually a real thing. So when we lean into our strengths in good times, it's a superpower. And also, it is more likely to help us feel resilient in tougher times. And so, one exercise you could share with your friends that you're referencing, or for anyone here who's listening, would be, I'm seeing some comments about loving Via. And the quick aside, so, and Len, you said this in the intro, all of my work ties personal and professional, like integrates them. The Clifton strengths, the Gallup strengths, as they're also known, were really devised for workplace. And I love Via because it's meant to be agnostic to where you are. It's basically saying these are your strengths. When you bring them wherever you go, whether it's work or a group of friends or community or a hobby or whatever else, more likely to shine, more likely to be resilient. And so knowing yours can be really helpful, like leaning into your top 5 or top 7, but also knowing that whatever your lesser strengths, which are very beautifully not called weaknesses, that you can cultivate those. So one fun, and thank you for putting that link in the chat, one fun thing, fun for a positive psychology practitioner could be to take a month and like say each month, I'm going to this day work on bravery, this day lean into gratitude, this day lean into forgiveness. And again, the micro dose of I'm just going to do a little, one thing a day, one thing, right? Finding something to be great. And the other thing I will say, so gratitude is one of the 24, but more universally, if you were to make a pie chart of sort of life satisfaction or happiness, there's a big chunk of that is our genetics, just like my hair color or height or whatever else. And there's a slice of it that is life experience. So in these moments, we think like a life experience like a pandemic or cancer, or a good life experience like falling in love or having a healthy child, that those are going to dominate our pie. But really, over the course of time, it's a relatively small slice. So it's like 50% genetics, 10% life experience, 40% is mindset. And this goes back to that growth or fixed mindset. And the best way to really enhance mindset in that life satisfaction pie, which ties to what you're asking too, is to practice gratitude. It's like a superpower in the positive psychology world, like the kale or quinoa superfood. If those are still the superfoods, I don't know. Those seem to change every so often, but gratitude is pretty consistently a superpower for people. And that's when I talked about that day with Ryan, my nephew, or the picture I showed you, because just finding one thing to be grateful for, that's where we start. I'm a big believer that big changes in our lives, they don't come from like New Year's resolutions usually fail people because they're too big. We try to tackle too much. And by like mid-January, or if even earlier, it's exhausting. But small steps, consistent small steps can lead to really meaningful big change. The last thing I want to say, the pandemic is not over. It is a dance. I use the dance metaphor a lot. So it also can be helpful for your friends who want to kind of cultivate this for the pandemic, this resilient mindset, to think back to something that is done, that is complete in their lives, that when they were going through it, it felt impossible or hard or challenging or traumatic. And then invite them to make a list of all the things, like the things that were unexpected, that were positive about it now that they look back, that were light moments in that dark. Because when you can look back and realize that you've used that muscle before for something that is complete, it can be a helpful tool to believe that you can in a moment that it's still ongoing.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. I hope that was helpful.
Sorry. So reading just some quotes from here. Darcy Andrew, I love the Via and the Clifton Strength Finders for discovering your purpose and intentionality in life. For those who are watching via LinkedIn Live and also the Zoom audience, I put the link to assessment if you want to take this. And Ardette, thank you for both inspiring us with this transparency. I believe in a community that can help inspire so that everyone can thrive and grow. And then also people thanking you, Sally, for your transparency and your honesty. And Jess Morris, I'm obsessed with the 5-minute journal because it really helped with getting my mind to focus on gratitude. I really like your kind of bringing up the when we think about change, it looks so big and scary, but sometimes it's these small little steps that we kind of work our way up to. I remember I've kind of struggled in and out with depression, anxiety for all my life, and I remember I was in a dark period one time, and I've always been like a creature of habit, right? I'd wake up and literally my day was very monotonous. And I remember talking to a friend just saying that I just felt so stuck. I'm stuck. I don't know what to do. I just don't know how to break this cycle. And she just looked at me and she's like, eat at a restaurant you've never been to. When you walk, take a different path. And it sounds so not stupid, but it's like I'm trying to change my life and you're telling me to eat sushi, sashimi, even though I will never eat raw fish. And I did just that, because I was someone who just ate the same foods, walked the same path I'd always take. And I just started doing small things. I tried sashimi for the first time, even though I said I hate fish, and I ended up loving it. I would take a path and I would just, oh, I wonder what would happen if I turned here. And those little, stupid as it sounds, those little kind of small changes, I would soon start escalating it. You know, eventually I quit a job I hated out of the blue, which I would never have done before because of these small little steps of just kind of getting my body almost used to these small changes and then making them bigger and bigger and bigger. Um,
I love that. We get
yeah,
stuck, right? We get so stuck in our patterns, our routines, and we forget that just these small changes can just be a great reset. And like, actually, you're talking about the walks. That's why I play that little color game, because if we just even are going on the same walk and we say, let me notice something new, let me just make a turn somewhere else. And it's that then we bring back to our computers, or we bring back into whatever the rest of our days that maybe kind of felt a little stuck. I'm also a big fan, I will just add, little micro doses of really just getting your energy going, like a dance party by yourself in your house, apartment. Like every time before I got on this call today, before I give a talk, like 2 to 4, when we actually know ours, there's a lot of science that shows that whole, play to your strengths is a saying most of us have heard, but it's actually a real thing. So when we lean into our strengths in good times, it's a superpower. And also, it is more likely to help us feel resilient in tougher times. And so, one exercise you could share with your friends that you're referencing, or for anyone here who's listening, would be, I'm seeing some comments about loving Via. And the quick aside, so, and Len, you said this in the intro, all of my work ties personal and professional, like integrates them. The Clifton strengths, the Gallup strengths, as they're also known, were really devised for workplace. And I love Via because it's meant to be agnostic to where you are. It's basically saying these are your strengths. When you bring them wherever you go, whether it's work or a group of friends or community or a hobby or whatever else, more likely to shine, more likely to be resilient. And so knowing yours can be really helpful, like leaning into your top 5 or top 7, but also knowing that whatever your lesser strengths, which are very beautifully not called weaknesses, that you can cultivate those. So one fun, and thank you for putting that link in the chat. One fun thing fun for a positive psychology practitioner could be to take a month and like say each month I'm going to this day work on bravery, this day lean into gratitude, this day lean into forgiveness. And again, the micro dose of I'm just going to do a little, one thing a day, one thing, right? Finding something to be great. And the other thing I will say, so gratitude is one of the 24, but more universally, if you were to make a pie chart of sort of life satisfaction or happiness, there's a big chunk of that is our genetics, just like my hair color or height or whatever else. And there's a slice of it that is life experience. So in these moments, we think like a life experience like a pandemic or cancer, or a good life experience like falling in love or having a healthy child, that those are going to dominate our pie. But really over the course of time, it's a relatively small slice. So it's like 50% genetics, 10% life experience, 40% is mindset. And this goes back to that growth or fixed mindset. And the best way to really enhance mindset in that life satisfaction pie, which ties to what you're asking too, is to practice gratitude. It's like a superpower in the positive psychology world, like the kale or quinoa superfood. If those are still the superfoods, I don't know. Those seem to change every so often, but gratitude is pretty consistently a superpower for people. And that's when I talked about that day with Ryan, my nephew, or the picture I showed you, because just finding one thing to be grateful for, that's where we start. I'm a big believer that big changes in our lives, they don't come from like New Year's resolutions usually fail people because they're too big. We try to tackle too much. And by like mid-January, or if even earlier, it's exhausting. But small steps, consistent small steps can lead to really meaningful big change. The last thing I want to say, the pandemic is not over. It is a dance. I use the dance metaphor a lot. So it also can be helpful for your friends who want to kind of cultivate this for the pandemic, this resilient mindset, to think back to something that is done, that is complete in their lives, that when they were going through it, it felt impossible or hard or challenging or traumatic. And then invite them to make a list of all the things, like the things that were unexpected, that were positive about it now that they look back, that were light moments in that dark. Because when you can look back and realize that you've used that muscle before for something that is complete, it can be a helpful tool to believe that you can in a moment that it's still ongoing.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. I hope that was helpful.
Reading just some quotes from here. Darcy Andrew, I love the Via and the Clifton Strength Finders for discovering your purpose and intentionality in life. For those who are watching via LinkedIn Live and also the Zoom audience, I put the link to assessment if you want to take this. And Ardette, thank you for both inspiring us with this transparency. I believe in a community that can help inspire us so that everyone can thrive and grow. And then also people thanking you, Sally, for your transparency and your honesty. And Jess Morris, I'm obsessed with the 5-minute journal because it really helped with getting my mind to focus on gratitude. I really like your kind of bringing up the when we think about change, it looks so big and scary, but sometimes it's these small little steps that we kind of work our way up to. I remember I've kind of struggled in and out with depression, anxiety for all my life. And I remember I was in a dark period one time, and I've always been like a creature of habit, right? I'd wake up and literally my day was very monotonous. And I remember talking to a friend just saying that I just felt so stuck. I don't know what to do. I just don't know how to break this cycle. And she just looked at me and she's like, eat at a restaurant you've never been to. When you walk, take a different path. And it sounds so not stupid, but it's like, I'm trying to change my life and you're telling me to eat sushi, sashimi, even though I will never eat raw fish. And I did just that, because I was someone who just ate the same foods, walked the same path I'd always take. And I just started doing small things. I tried sashimi for the first time, even though I said I hate fish, and I ended up loving it. I would take a path and I would just, oh, I wonder what would happen if I turned here. And those little, stupid as it sounds, those little kind of small changes, I would soon start escalating it. You know, eventually I quit a job I hated out of the blue, which I would never have done before because of these small little steps of just kind of getting my body almost used to these small changes and then making them bigger and bigger and bigger. Um,
I love that. We get
yeah,
stuck, right? We get so stuck in our patterns, our routines, and we forget that just these small changes can just be a great reset. And like actually you're talking about the walks, it's why I play that little color game, because if we just even are going on the same walk and we say, let me notice something new. Let me just make a turn somewhere else. And it's that then we bring back to our computers, or we bring back into whatever the rest of our days that maybe kind of felt a little stuck. I'm also a big fan, I will just add, little micro doses of really just getting your energy going, like a dance party by yourself in your house, apartment. Like every time before I got on this call today, before I give a talk, like 2 to 4 minutes, play even a snippet of a favorite song or a whole song. Just get your energy going in a way that you're not used to. The beauty of dance, there's no right or wrong way to do it. You can dance like a fool and it can be amazing. And we are so stuck. I think also the pandemic has kept so many of us in the same seat, literally, for so long, that when we used to walk between things or drive between things or get going, we're not doing that in the same way. And I think that also can be like a smaller source of, like, we're talking about trauma or hardship. Our bodies are struggling because of that too. So when we let ourselves, small step, right? First step of a dance, figuratively, or literally, I should say, actually helps us figuratively take those other steps with other things.
I love that. And we have a whole bunch of comments as well. I've coined my Liz Ravenwood, I've coined my personal dance, my prana dancing. Michael suggests going to the Color Factory for creativity and to kind of just get out of, you know,
It's so
your
much
little
fun.
pause. Chantel Power says, my 5-minute dance break saved me during COVID. I love that. So we are almost up for time. Um, quickly, Sally, where can people find you?
So where we reconnected is the place where I post most, which is LinkedIn. Feel free to follow or connect there.
Add
And
yourself to the comments, please.
so let me
Yes.
do that. And
And
then,
then we'll do that on the LinkedIn as well.
yeah, I really love it. It's really become my favorite social. And then aside from that, I'm just trying to multitask, which I'm not good at. And then my website is my full name, SALLYWOLF.com. So you can find me there too, but I would say LinkedIn. And for those who are on Instagram, I'm Sally Shoots, but I don't post that much.
And what do you want people on this call watching you right now on live stream in the Zoom audience, wherever they may be? What do they want? What's a one important thing for them to take away from today's conversation?
I would say really to be able to find one little piece of light, one little spark. Think of it like a spark, right? Just a spark in a day that you look back on as a tough day, one spark, and then maybe that will lead to another and another. But I really think a lot about this dance between light and dark, and you will prime yourself over time, the more you do that, to be able to see a better balance, the balance you likely seek, where it's not just this little spark, it's more light and the light grows. And the darkness may still be there, but you see it as a source of inspiration that can coexist and lead to a lot of unexpected light in your life too.
I love this. Okay, so for those in the Zoom audience, you know what to do. Turn your video on, unmute yourself because Sally deserves a round of applause. Everyone, turn on your videos, unmute yourself. Round of applause for Sally. Woohoo! Thank you so much, Sally. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We have people from all over the world kind of listening in. For those who are on kind
Thank
of
you so
live stream as
much.
well, thank you all. And we hope you got some beauty from this, follow Sally on LinkedIn. I will post it. I think she's posted it on the chat. And for those who are kind of watching on LinkedIn Live, I'll post her LinkedIn page as well. Anything you want to say?
I just want to say thank you. I was so excited about you. We had connected on this in December, and I was so excited to kind of start Q1 right. You know, I had this at the beginning of the year. And I just want to thank each and every one of you who are here, because you are a really engaged community. And I can see it with how present you are, and you're still here, right? And it's 2 minutes after the hour. And I just want to say thank you, especially everyone I see, or even, feel I see your names if your video's off. That's really, really meaningful to me. And it inspires the ability that I feel for authenticity and transparency. So just know that even if you're muted on a Zoom screen or just listening, right? There's a beauty to active listening and holding space for someone else to share their story, and it invites someone else to do the same. And Len, I'm going to end on this because I think this will resonate with you and your community. My favorite cartoon ever, I don't even know who to give credit to. I had seen it on Facebook years ago. It's two stick figures, and one says to the other, "I'll show you mine if you show me yours." Sounds a little dirty. You don't know where it's going to go. And the second panel just shows these two stick figures revealing their huge, big red hearts.
Oh.
That is life. And so when you are present listening, it lets someone else speak, and then it lets someone else hold the space, maybe not in this exact format, but I feel connected to each of you. I can see, even though you may not have said anything, and I'm saving the chat to read for later. So thank you so much for being here. And thank you, Lan, for inviting me to be a part of this beautiful community.
I love that. Thank you so much. Round of applause again. Thanks, Sally. Bye, everyone, and I will see you at the next microlearning. See ya. So if you're watching this as well online, we want to help more people. So if you're watching this right now, please like, comment, and share so that we can help more people with this free training. Our community of 7 microlearning helps our listener elevate their mindset and skill set by bringing in leading authors, coaches, executives, founders, and subject matter experts. Our goal is to train over 1 million people. Our microlearnings are trained on training and development, focuses on offering bite-sized, small learning units with just the right amount of information to help learners achieve a goal. This is not a webinar. We want you to grow. Our goal of Community 7 is to democratize leadership development for everyone. That's why we make these microlearnings open and free to the public. I want to thank Community of 7 core members and supporter members for supporting these talks with your membership dues so that we can help even more people. If you're interested in becoming a supporter member, go to communityof7.com, and it's only $99 a year. For those in the live Zoom audience, if you can, once again, turn on your video. Today's topic is on